Utö to Sandhamn or something like this, which is an insane distance. But if you think about the straight distance island hopping, it's doable.
Is that what you're doing?
This is what I like to do, and I do it on a very small scale.
In a swimming pool?
Amateur in Sweden, in a swimming pool. Currently, I'm training in a swimming pool. I've done some small swim runs, but when you typically want to learn technique, you need training time in a swimming pool. And recently, I had this very awkward experience because I am a bad swimmer, and so it's a challenge to learn that. It's very overwhelming sensorily, and you need to do some tricks that maybe you have never done before. And one of them is turning around in the pool. And what happens when you try it for the first time?
It's like the professional swimmers that they flip around.
Exactly, it's this flipping around part.
Turning.
Yeah. So you get dizzy in your head, you get disoriented, and you try to figure out where in space you are. And the first time you try it, it goes awfully bad. But surprisingly, with the 2-3 attempts, like you adjust to the system, and it becomes better and better. So something that you think that it's impossible to do is actually possible to learn within a few iterations with our physical bodies. I find it super fascinating.
And it's amazing how quickly the human brain can learn as well, right? The intelligence that we have for doing stuff like swimming. Imagine having a robot trying to learn how to do that in that efficient way, right?
Yeah, and I guess we are doing swim runs a lot because of we have the opportunity with the archipelago in Sweden, and of course a lot of people doing swim runs also doing they're coming from the triathlon perspective, where you swim, you run, and you also bicycle. So I think there's a bit of an overlap. People doing triathlons, getting into swim runs. Is that?
That is exactly the same thing. I've been there, done that. Enjoy not having bike with me better, less gear.
So you've been there and you tried it.
Yeah. Doing a triathlon as well? Or?
Yeah.
Oh,
so you
but it was a small one.
So you went from the triathlon, tried that out, and then
try the swim run.
And then
it's more elegant. Let's put it this way. Nicer. You don't need to change. It's more straightforward.
Well, and
have you done a triathlon?
Yeah, I have. I have.
You have?
I have.
Really?
But don't ask me when. We had that in school, and but it was actually proper. What now turns out to be the Olympic distance. So what is that? That is like 1,500 meters swimming or 1,000 meters swimming. I can't remember. And then it was like 10K running and 40K biking.
Exactly.
Is that
That's correct, yeah.
Is it 1,000 or 1,500 swimming?
1,500, I think.
Yeah.
And 40 and 10.
So we had that in our school. So, and I did, at that point in time I had a physique that was quite okay. And I surfed, so I had a little bit of swimming technique over the years, but of course that was my worst game. But swim runs I've never done. But it's also daunting to me the whole idea that you start in one island, you run across an island, you swim the strait, you run the next island, and then you swim a strait. It's just a very cool idea.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
What sold it for me was this beautiful advertisement where you do it with a colleague, with a partner.
Yeah.
So you're not only taking the challenge for yourself, but you are trying to also accommodate and make sure that you will succeed as a team. So it's very nice sport.
And this is
very
of
elegant.
course a safety topic because you're swimming straits. And so there's a safety issue that you do it. You always do swim runs in a team of two, right?
Yes.
But you're not connected, right?
Well, you can do it nowadays as well on your own solo, but I think two, it's just so much nicer.
You know what? I'm feeling more and more bad about myself here. I haven't been running or training properly for a long time, so enough of this. But congrats on you, and I should do something similar.
I was a little bit going to go into the technology that you are using. Can we do that 1 minute?
Okay, sure.
So what is do you have like a GPS compass or a watch? Do you have, what do you run in? What do you swim in your shoes? a little bit practical here.
Yeah, there is a bit of technology. Maybe the most important is the one that helps you to propel through water fastest. So these are paddles. They are not used in a typical triathlon.
You're allowed to have the paddles.
So you are allowed to have paddles and use your arm strength to propel yourself through water.
The paddle is like, what is that? Like a plastic disc?
It's a plastic disc, approximately 2 or 3 times your arm span or hand span. So it's, it's a device that helps you. And then you have a hydro costume, not to get cold, because this is a cold temperatures.
So like a wetsuit?
A wetsuit.
Is it a version of a wetsuit? Is it a wetsuit or is it something slightly different?
It's something slightly different. It's, I guess you can have the full wetsuit in the cold temperatures, but typically you use a short sleeves up to knees costume.
And shoes. You need to then swim in your shoes.
And then you need to swim in your shoes, which is great because you never need to change your shoes. So you swim with your shoes and then you run in the same shoes, in the same outfit.
And do you have like a watch or a GPS or something like this?
Yeah, for tracking your own progress, not really that much for finding yourself where you
don't really need it.
You don't really need it, not in the amateur level that I am operating.
And are you using any data and AI in order to improve your performance here?
Or at least analytics, perhaps.
Analytics, yes. Follow your watch suggestions, saying how well you feel today, how much you can push in training and things like that, how well you slept.
And now comes the real question. Are you an Apple Ultra geek or you're a Garmin geek?
That's a Garmin.
I'm an Epix guy.
Okay,
what girl are you? What watch do you like?
Garmin Phoenix.
The Phoenix, yes. The Phoenix and the Epix is the same, but slightly different technology for the screen.
All right.
There you go. Some nerdery.
Very nerdy. I like it.
But I should have worn my. If I knew, I would have worn my Garmin.
No signaling from you.
Yeah, and I have like. Do you have the I have the big one. It looks ridiculous, like a saucer, but I have so bad eyes. I have the big. Have more battery, and it's easier to read as a GPS navigator map. Do you have the big one, or do you have the ladies? I shouldn't say ladies, but
big one. Define the big one.
56, like over 15 millimeters in diameter. Looks ridiculous as a watch in one way, but I think it's cool.
Oh, not that big one, no.
I have so bad eyes.
Anyway, enough with this. The interesting with the nerdiness on swimming and gadgetry, running and whatnot. But with that, very welcome here. And I'm going to fail now, but I'm going to try to pronounce your name. You told me before. Grigonyte.
Thanks for inviting.
Grigonyte.
Gintare. That's a very good one. Yeah, Grigonyte Gintare.
Beautiful name.
Thanks.
But okay, so you work with the AI strategy at the Swedish Tax Authority, and that will be super interesting to hear more about. What they're thinking about that. But also, I think you have a passion about using open source models. Especially, I guess, in the public sector, something that I'm also very interested in and have a dear heart for thinking more about. So I think that will be super interesting to hear more about your ideas about that. But before we get into that, perhaps you can just give us a few minutes on really who is Grigonyte Gintare.
Yeah, so I have been an academic for a very long time, and approximately 5-6 years ago transitioned to public sector, where I am applying data science skills and working with projects that are related to AI. Recently, I took up a new role and started...
Before we go there, can you just mention briefly, what did you do in academia?
In academia, I had a rather broad profile, actually. So I started like computer scientist, found myself attracted to a field which was at the time called computational linguistics.
Of course. Yeah.
There has been this fantastic network, NGSLT, if that rings a bell for any of you.
No.
There was a network of collaboration in higher education where you can invite specialists and professors from anywhere abroad and form a small PhD student groups and provide training within the field, because at the time when I was studying, we didn't really have programs dedicated for computational linguistics in all parts of the Europe. So that was that one thing that really hooked me up for computational linguistics. And then I pursued for a while academic career in that area. So I did my PhD in also within the area of computational linguistics. There I looked at ontologies and extracting knowledge from domain text, both extracting and actually validating ontologies. And
did you work with the semantic web as well at that time?
Semantic web was a big topic. It was a really big topic in around 2010. It was like
I worked with that as well. So.
All right. Yeah. And
what do you think about that? You know, it's more or less died out, of course, but did you have hopes for semantic web to become a valuable thing?
I did. I mean, sort of my PhD topic was connected to that. So, you know, if I wouldn't have thought that way, why would I have done it otherwise? Yeah. But it's, I think now looking back in retrospect, it looks, I don't know, it's sort of, it's a pity that it died out, but I also see some of the ideas that have been very viable in that time, that they are also coming back now. For instance, the importance of ontologies is again starting to ring the bells in even the AI
and the
time.
AI and the whole RAG perspective and how we understand and structure text or decompose text to go from a very broad, you know, there is so many things here that maybe it was onto something, but the solution was premature, but maybe the fundamental ideas need to pivot into something else. Is it dead? Is it dead?
I think so. But if you take the normal web, you know, the normal web that we have is made for humans. And the problem at that time, at least, was that machines can't read it. So semantic web was about creating a machine-readable web. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I was also, it didn't lose the ambition to provide more, like with that machine-readable aspect, it didn't lose ambition to provide more back for humans, right? So it wouldn't be only for machines, like you could actually get applications out of it that would augment information that you typically access through the web. So that, I think that was a strong factor in it as well.
And why did it not succeed, or why did it die out or lose in hype and interest? What, you know, two experts or two different, what would you say?
Where is your take on this?
Thank you for that. No, but I think, you know, it's interesting because it takes the formal logic kind of approach, and they had this kind of thing with the ontology web language based on RDF and these kind of things. OWL, exactly. That's good. I mean, it's based on something called description logic. It's a formal logic that you hope would be able to make machines be able to, for one, understand stuff, but also potentially reason. But it is a symbolic AI approach, I would call it. And we all know what happened with symbolic AI. Some people say it's coming back. We'll see. But I think the idea of using formal logic to try to describe the world and reason about it is awesome in theory, but in practice very, very hard. And I think that's why it died out. And I think now potentially we have deep learning that can understand human readable text potentially to the same extent, even though not as consistent and formally coherent, but we may not need to have two versions of the web available for having machines being able to work with it these days.
How would you describe?
I would say I would take more the angle from application, like what could ontology and like that specific way of representing knowledge give to you. So when it comes to application, I think like the main reason why it was really hard to build ontologies. Yeah. There were very few people who could do that. It was also, it was rather, I remember the importance of knowledge bases that came along with ontology building. And now to think of some examples, I need maybe Göran's help of what were the biggest knowledge bases around 2010. The Wikipedia DB.
It was.
What was it called?
FreeDB
was a very big. So the results of that, the knowledge bases, they were applied very widely in various applications, in health research, in basically anywhere where you needed to improve search results or find relevant information. So that was very big.
I think we can connect it to knowledge graphs as well, which is heavily used today, though. So both Google and Microsoft in their search engines have something they call the knowledge graph, and it's basically trying to connect factual points to each other in a graph of knowledge, and then they connect potential factoids. When was Barack Obama born, and that's stored like in factoids in a structured way. And but then the question is that really necessary given the extreme power that today's deep learning system have? I think still they may have, but if you look
at
to the same extent.
And if you look at the RAG angle on this topic, we say, okay, we have a large language model, and then we need to fine tune it with our own data. We need to fine tune it in a more narrow sense for narrow. And then we come back to these topics of ontology and understanding domain expertise, domain knowledge. So there it's almost like there's fundamental problems here that are still there, and we are finding other paths, and there's a lot of learning from that era that is now applied or figured out in different ways. And I think you can trace it into how much do we want to focus on the node and the database or this logic, and how much do we want to focus on the relationships between different nodes. And then, so there are many things that it's not the semantic web, of course, but there's a lot of deeper thinking here that is still worked on today.
I agree. I mean, it's the same thinking, like that it trickled into so many applications that we have and use. So I think the importance was big for it.
We got stuck here very quickly in the rabbit hole, but it was my fault.
But even last we talked about dynamic and online learning, and we talked about representing libraries in vector space with our there are so many different techniques, but we are trying to achieve knowledge and reasoning, I guess.
So knowledge representation, I would say. I mean,
knowledge representation.
So either you can take the symbolic approach like semantic web, or you can take more of a connectionist approach, if you call it that.
Connectionists.
Anyway, okay, so you had
rabbit hole one.
Yeah, but I love having an academic here since I also have that background. So fun to speak about these things, I think. But you went to the Swedish Tax Authority, and
yes, that's correct.
Yes, and if you were to just speak a bit briefly about what is your role there today?
So currently I am working there as AI strategist. But I have been working as a data scientist for quite a long time at Skatteverket or Swedish Tax Authority. These are two rather different, but also at the same time related roles. The current one builds from the knowledge that you have from the previous one, basically. So as a data scientist, I worked on various AI applications and projects that you use in the Swedish Tax Authority. And as a strategist, I look into the ways of how to make digitalization process more effective, how to scale AI applications, how to...
So it's more long-term, or how would you describe the differences?
Long-term planning, but with the knowledge of how it works in practice, basically. Something like that.
And just very quickly, it's always interesting coming from the enterprise world. How is this, in a nutshell, structured, or where do you sit in the organization with an AI strategy role? Is it a tech role? Is it in IT? Or is it how does it work?
Oh, okay. The way how it is in Swedish Tax Authority, it's a separate role from IT. IT also has its own strategist, but the reason why it is separate is that it's meant also to support the way how AI projects are led in organizations, so support the decision making and prioritization within organization. So it's some sort of a bridging role between very technical development and management and steering.
Is it more product oriented kind of work, or is it more R&D oriented, or
it becomes it's product oriented, I would say, even though public sector is a very different animal from regular organizations that are meant to produce product.
Yeah, but and if we use now, I fully understand what you're saying. We're using the terminology product here in relation to making something robust enough to go into production and service with potentially millions of users if it's outside of Skatteverket, and maybe hundreds and thousands of users if it's inside Skatteverket. And therefore you need to have a resilience and robustness that goes beyond research. That's, I think, how do you...
It's engineering or research, more or less.
Yeah,
but you usually have a product organization, which I think you do in Skatteverket or in the tax authority, right?
Yes.
Yes. So are you working in teams that also like working directly with the product owners and things like that, or?
Yes. That is like a closely related work. Yeah,
makes sense.
Awesome. Is it a separate role? Are you uniquely the person that have an AI strategy role, or is it other people that also have similar?
There are other people who also have AI strategy role. So currently I'm working closely with one more colleague. But as I said, there are as well strategic roles within development area as well. So they
Can you share anything you're working with right now?
Okay, let's see. I think it would be maybe interesting to go a step back and just tell a little bit how we are sort of digitizing Swedish Tax Authority.
Lead us into the topic. Perfect.
So I think it's very important to say that it's an ongoing effort that has been that is several decades long at least. And the colleagues with whom I am working, and they have been in the organization for 20, 30 years, they as well remember digitalization efforts. So it's pretty cool to see that long of the commitment.
And I think, the Swedish Tax Authority has one of the more developed, I would say, pipelines or development cycles for digitalizing products.
Okay, thanks for saying that.
In the public sector, for sure.
But I think you started your digitalization journey, was it 2008 or something? Was it?
I guess you can put different timelines. I could say, like, from my perspective, when I started working at the Swedish Tax Authority, that was around 2018. So there we started with applications that were related to text processing and risk evaluation models. And in order, to just have done these text processing applications, these are like various, let's say, text categorization, transcription, HTR, OCR pipelines. It's something that that really helps and prepares for converting those pipelines to more efficient AI applications. Mm-hmm.
But if you anyone who is in Sweden, we can really feel the digitalization going on, because we can even talk about when was the first time we were able to do a digital tax return. When was the first time that the digital tax return was the primary approach and the paper-based was the secondary approach? I think these are pretty good milestones. And then within that context, we're just augmenting. So I think it's a storytelling I want to do here. Is about you digitalize workflows, you digitalize services, and now you can add more data, and you can have different type of data. You can get into text, and it's just you're augmenting over and over and over, and you're never done. Would that be a summary? Because I really think it's quite amazing if you look at the full journey of digitalization. It's a nice one.
Yeah, I would agree. So the journey is ongoing, and it's a relentless effort to continue on the journey, of course. I like very much the example that you brought of the digital tax declaration form. And what year was it that...
I can't remember.
I don't know either.
Because the first pivotal moment was, I can actually do this online. The second pivotal moment, the online is the primary process and the paper process is the secondary. When we did, and I think the biggest flip is really when you're starting from the digital first approach. And this is maybe not 10 years even.
I came in there where we needed to do the how you can automate some parts of the digital declaration and make it easier for the tax service person looking at these declarations. How do you support their work so they are more efficient in looking at them?
And then you have, this is so interesting because then you have the digitalization for the consumer, so their process is more seamless and streamlined. But you can do a lot of work where you behind the scenes are very manual internally. So it's like the digitalization of the workflow for me as a consumer handing in my tax return versus all the people that goes into the work. And I think that back end part we don't know about, of course.
Yeah. And of course the other very big part of it is digitizing even those channels that are not like, as you recalled it, like, the text formula became at some point the secondary way of filling your declaration. But did you know that your text fill declaration has also been digitized inside Swedish Tax Authority? So we are able to read it and extract information from it and pass it in the process of...
I don't know that, but I could have imagined it and I could have anticipated, but where is the maturity on actually reading it digitized? I don't know, of course.
But just going back a bit to the nice framing you did in the beginning.
Just 2003, the first time.
First time was just 2003, but that to me, and then when did they make it the primary process? That would have been later. That would have been 10 years later, in my opinion. Roughly.
So, I think Tax Authority in Sweden was one of the first to really go on to this digitalization journey. And these days, of course, they have so many e-services and are working in such a digital...
Correction, 1998.
For the digital tax return? No.
The first time people in Sweden could declare tax returns online was 1998.
What?
Yes.
But this is what we're talking about. Like it looks online here, but the work behind the scenes, so there is
something else. Yes,
something else.
Sounds like ChatGPT is hallucinating now. But okay, let's.
It's not the ChatGPT.
Okay.
It's perplexity.
But in any case, you've been on that journey in the Tax Authority, even though you joined later, of course. But they've been on that journey for a long time and been really successful, I think, in digitalizing a lot of their services that they have. But if you were to also think about, how to modernize, all the processes you have not only by moving from analog to digital, but then moving to AI potentially as well. Do you know, can you share anything, if you compare the digitalization journey towards the AI journey?
How does it look like?
Yeah, when and how do you start to also think, can AI be used to improve and optimize this process even more?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So once you have a way of developing services, I typically very much like also sometimes going back and looking into some quite interesting stats. So if you look at the yearly report that Swedish Tax Authority releases, there is some very interesting information from the perspective that how you can look into interactions that happen between Swedish citizens and the tax authority. And if you look from the point of the information modality there, you will see that text is a major modality in which those interactions occur. And the biggest interaction pools being website visits, personal page visits when you log into your personal space. And of course, various calls, email contacts, things like that. And of course, there is a lot of numeric data. But my point is that text is a very profound and very big part of interaction, how we interact nowadays.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, you can think that a lot of interactions work with structured data, but in reality, it's more unstructured than text that is mainly used as a form of communication.
Yes, there is a lot of structured data that not to be underestimated. This is a huge iceberg under the water. It's a lot of structured digital numeric data, but also enormous amount of unstructured text data that you have. So because of that, like around 5-6 years ago, the first attempts for applying AI was actually what can you do with this unstructured text data,
makes sense.
and how can you facilitate some sort of automation and digitalization there. And with that respect, that was a perfect environment where you can come as a data scientist, take your NLP book and just apply everything that there is there. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's a lot of fun. While doing that, of course, you iterate over cycles of repeating the same process. You mature, become better. That's of course part of the story. There was at the same time an agile development coming in Swedish Tax Authority, which transformed the way in which you produce products and release software. So,
do you have a big framework that you all apply to, like Agile Safe or
Agile Safe? Yeah, that's the framework.
So you had as one part of the modernization of how we do digital transformation is also in relation to ways of working according to a Agile Safe framework. When was that coming in?
That was early on. It was around 2019. It's maybe not early on in the terms of
for public sector.
For public sector, this is
for
early.
Private sector,
but also because there are so many failures in this that people have sort of tried to apply Agile Safe, but the real traditional organization is still there. But I guess you have your release trains, you have your value streams, you have your arts, you have your different roles. And
yes, and it's actually coming more into place, I would say. Swedish tax organization has reorganized recently, and now agile and let's say a value steering and the project steering, portfolio steering, is also a part of organization, which has not been before.
But this is the challenge when you're really living in two different patterns and you're trying to, console between them, but they're not really always
So I have mentioned before that the public sector is a different animal, and I just want to clarify why is it that it's very often you have silos that we also talk when we are in the private sector, but silos here are very often by design, so they're meant to be separate parts of organization, and the reasoning there is both from the data security perspective and for a particular type of data serving particular purpose only. So that's an interesting and important difference, I would say. However, it is possible to build a development layer that can be scalable. So, and the Swedish Tax Authority basically is doing it through having build a portfolio of those applications that deal with the major modalities of interactions that come to the Swedish Tax Authority. And now the challenge is, how do you change those pipelines that you have built and those processes that you have built for development? How do you use AI in order to extract some gains for efficiency, let's say? So this is the current
gains for efficiency in what? In ways of working, or do you mean for products? Or
for products?
Okay. But before we leave it, I think the topic that we started to go into a bit, how the Swedish Tax Authority is making use of agile, how you said that they're using SAFE then to have some kind of large-scale agile workflows. But you said something about, did you say reorganization or what was it?
Yeah, a reorganization.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Reorganization is, I'm thinking, how can I put it in a very short and concise way? It's something that this particular organization is doing within a certain cyclicity. So when I joined Swedish Tax Authority, it has had reorganized once, and it has gone through another cycle of reorganization recently. This one was meant to align the various areas of activity with the development to better reflect the needs of various business areas, also to improve the portfolio steering, basically, of the value that you produce.
I think it's a super interesting topic, and you say silos by design. Normally, silos is associated with a really bad, way of organizing things, and it's hard to share, competence, knowledge, infrastructure, way of working. So you lose the kind of collaboration that you have if you have too many silos. But are you saying in some way that you have found a way to still bridge that, so you can, between different silos, still share experience, best practices, knowledge?
Absolutely. Yes, they can. Once you, I guess what I am after is when you work with the data and you try to find a solution for a particular data problem. That solution, of course, can be applied with a slight modification to various domains. So, for instance, let's that solution being search, or that solution being translation service for a particular domain or so. So they are a more general projects that can be applied within different domains.
But when it comes to just the organization, let's say you want to do text categorization or something that is very general, that can be applied, I think, across different silos. If one of the silos have a great solution for that, how do they share it to other parts?
Sorry, could you repeat again?
So let's say one silo. You have it in the taxation silo, for example, in Tax Authority, and they come up with an awesome solution. It works well, and they worked a lot with it, and perfect. It's put in production. It's refined, and now you want to reuse it. Now you want to make sure that the other parts of the authority is also able to make use of this. So you share the knowledge, you spread the knowledge, you scale the value in some way. How do you do that if you're organized in silos?
All right. So in our case, we have a development teams that are working very flexibly and can develop for various of those business silos. So developed teams have their products, various solutions, and those solutions are in a way they are both developed for a particular one, but they also could be scaled in the way that they are independent from a solution perspective. So if you twist that angle to a particular problem, let's say we mentioned their text categorization, that is an easy to use application for various silos, various domains, even various public sector authorities, I would argue.
Yeah, and used to connect it back to what I was trying to get to, and then we leave it. If I take what I mean with value lineage here is like you have two different domains, and they're working with their very specific solutions, and maybe even need to be separated, segregation of duties, tax, and as you said, registry. Underneath the surface here, we have a product we can develop in terms of text categorization that typically it's a pattern that both can use and then apply it in their different cases. So then you have an investment for the back-end product, so to speak, that is servicing two different domains, and then you have the actual business case of doing their work faster and their work faster. Typically, then we have a challenge, when are we, that we need to find value lineage, who is owning the back-end product versus who are owning the domain usage of that product in their solution. And if you want to understand the value of building a categorization engine, you need to understand, well, I built that once and I can use it many ways. And now we have value lineage from a back-end team to a front-end team. And typically, if I go into the enterprise world, we get lost here because IT is doing that over here, and we're doing replatforming, and we're doing a lot of shit. And then we have shadow IT because we don't understand what they're doing, so the domains go out and do the same thing again and again, And we have the same problem, if I argue, in the full public sector, where it's very scary when someone says, we need to have a central infrastructure. If you think that's going to be on the solution space, or it's actually on the back-end services that many can use. So here at Value Lineage, to understand one service being used in order to increase the productivity of this team, and then they are using it in order to apply it in their solution. So then there's different portfolios that ultimately, in the end, the business case for building the categorization will not hold if only one domain is using it, but if 10 domains are using it, it's a brilliant case, value lineage.
Yeah, fantastic example.
This is tricky.
No, I think
this is really super tricky.
Yeah. No, I think we got slipped there on the terminology, but thanks for bringing this.
Time is flying away as well here. Yeah, I'd love we have so many interesting topics to cover here, and I'd love to also get more into open source. And I know you have a special interest in that. Perhaps you can just elaborate. How can we potentially find value from open source models in public sector?
So open source is really big in public sector. For having, firstly from, of course, the financial perspective, having something that you can take and use, and something that has been, let's say, to a certain degree, reliably developed by a bigger community, trustworthy. Of course, additionally, you need all kinds of screening and security procedures in order to use it. But nevertheless, it's a very good place to start. A lot of open source solutions also come from academic research. Again,
is that a good or bad thing?
Well, Could be.
That's a rabbit hole.
Could
Don't
be
go there.
either. You have a very strong viewpoint there, Anders.
Yeah, well, I'm blaming myself. So,
But we'll take that later because this is. But that's a good one. But continue.
Yeah. All right. So for instance, why open source is big? For first, of course, I'm thinking for if we are talking like large language models, then it also comes in the. Actually, it's not only that; it's like a bigger package that open source provides, and that is software that you use for using these models. But also even, I would say, evaluation, and how we judge that, the model is good. So that is also like a very big contribution from the open source community, basically.
Yeah.
To have those benchmarks, it's like one way of navigating yourself. And knowing, what to choose from the multitude of options. So it's super big. It's very, very important.
And you just taking a step out of it, are we still needing to do a lot of these things on premise? And this is also a rationale why we go open source in order to then package it and do it on premise, or can we even use, or are we also in the cloud to look at this, or is this a big topic here?
Oh,
Why?
It's a super big topic. I'm glad you brought it up. Actually, for public sector, when you work with the sensitive data, you simply, in some cases, do not have other alternative as, having a private cloud solution. You need to make sure that, you keep data safe, basically.
And is that one of the angles why we have then learned about mastering how to deal with open source? Because in the end, we needed to put it on an on-prem service and build a private cloud. So that has, when you open up that Pandora's box, you kind of need to get everything working, but it has a lot to do with this, that we can't do it.
Exactly, like almost from an evolutionary perspective, that we are forced to doing that, because this is our capacity. This is, how much of compute power we have. This is how our infrastructure can look like, and this can withhold only, a certain type of, let's say, large language model.
But just continue on the on-prem question here. Would you say it is more secure, or is it more for regulatory reasons that we need to keep it on-prem?
We say that, wouldn't you agree that regulatory reasons are there to make it secure?
Yeah, but that's not always correct.
But that is not always correct. Okay, well, give some example. Maybe we can start.
I have some background in these kind of questions, so that's why I'm asking a bit. And it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but actually the top cloud providers, if you take the top three, the security they have around their services and the way they manage data, I think is super hard for anyone else to copy. Basically, they have tens of thousands of man-years being spent in building something that is reusable for so many different clients. And to think that you can, if you try to build something from scratch yourself on-prem, that you even come close to the monitoring, to the security, to the encryption, to the compliance that they can have, I think it's very naive.
I like your argument, but that argument is only highlighting some of the parts. Okay. I would say, if you would agree,
part is not
it's highlighting the quality, maybe the cost efficientness, but of course, like you say, the quality of security itself, right? So that's what it's highlighting, and to that aspect, I agree. There are other parameters, though, that you sometimes need to look at, and that one example being, for instance, sovereignty. So, if the actor that is providing those amazing services, if they are not aligned longer with, the goals that you have, what are you left with? So it's important.
Do you fear that some kind of Secret Service agents or something in the other country may be getting access to the data that you have? Is that what you're saying?
Well, not necessarily. I'm thinking, that countries might change the positions. So, like organizations find themselves in the countries, and countries might change positions in how they react and how they act. So,
I love
point,
the sovereignty angle on this, and we would love to have a great cloud provider in Europe or in Sweden.
Oh, that would be fantastic. But in Sweden, that would be a dream.
But I think this is quite important, because now we are then fine-tuning and nuancing. It's not safe to be in the cloud. When you say safe be in the cloud, this is actually a very simplistic and, in my opinion, I would argue false topic. But as soon as we make a 360 dimension of what we're dealing with here, and we're talking about sovereignty, we're talking about geopolitics, we're talking about other things, and we're not talking about security techniques, then there is a rationale that maybe holds that we need a Swedish cloud provider. And I would argue, if we had the more nuanced and sharper conversation on sovereignty, we would be longer ahead with real investments in Europe or in Sweden on this topic, versus saying, it's not safe. Because I looked at these topics in Vattenfall, and in Vattenfall, when I worked there, it was a lot of NSI classified information. We have the national security grids, and clearly their security measures were way, way higher than we could master in terms of competencies on hardcore cybersecurity. But in the end, when you look at it like you did now, it's a slightly different question why we need to do it ourselves then.
But so do you feel that discussion is missing, should be broadened much more?
I think we're doing several discussions in such a simplistic way politically that actually obscures why we need to do it and what we should invest in. Because as an example, we need to build this and this and this and that. Why do we really need to build it? Okay, that's the reason. Then it makes it more clear what you should invest in. Should you invest in bare metal servers, or should you invest in open? So the more sharp you can be on why you need it, the more sharp you can be in what is it that we should invest in.
I think
this is my argument.
I mean, it's really great, and I think AI brings so many topics that need to be discussed. We have never touched upon them, and there are many topics that we need to have a broader discussion in the society. So,
and just trying to close a loop here on the topic we started with, which was like open source LLMs to start with, and perhaps or open source in general, but thinking then, can you just elaborate a bit more? If we take LLMs, we have a number of alternatives. Of course, we can go commercial, and we can use the big providers of LLMs in the US mainly, and France perhaps as well.
And China. If
yes,
you really want to go that way,
they're
not bad, technically.
No, they're actually very good. And then compare it to open source. What do you think the pros and cons is, and why should we go open source, or when should we go open source, do you think, compared to like commercial API-based solutions?
Well, another thing, great question. And I'm thinking one of the arguments that I'm thinking about also refers to, the question you asked about, is it only, the price that it defines why you're doing it? Is it only the platforms you can allow defines
it's really cheaper?
why you're doing it?
Sure,
but it's not only that. It's also like you want to converge to like a certain standard, so it's easy to, choose and use. And also, you want to try several options out, perhaps, and you need that flexibility for, in order to understand what actually you're going to.
What you're talking about here is technology agnosticity as well, right? Is that what you mean? Trying out agnostic, not being locked into,
Well, yes, in a way, and also I'm thinking now, when Anders raised, let's say even if you have providers that have a very good quality, you might not necessarily want to be locked on one provider. So it's also not only agnosticity, but it's also this, bringing in flexibility for, what you can use.
No,
but then I guess open source, they trying to catch up with the commercial, and some people say it's at least 3 months after the top ones all the time, and 3 months is not
3 months is nothing. Come on.
So that may not be a good argument, but still, it is potentially so that open source solution have a slightly lower quality than the commercial ones. So it must be something else that makes it worth doing it. And what would that be, would you say? Would it be the sovereignty angle? Would it be that we can control it in some way? Would it be to be able to run it on-prem, because you can actually run commercial solutions potentially on-prem as well?
I think all of those. I don't know. You can add. This flexibility that we mentioned earlier also adds to like a certain robustness, that you can redesign, and you can have, let's say, slight variations of solution if needed, so that's also for higher security purposes.
But you could add a wrapper around commercial
but
solutions.
You could add a wrapper, yeah.
But let me. It sounds like I'm very much against open source, and I'm certainly not. So I just need to explain myself.
I'm thinking, what commercial solution would you like to suggest here?
But so let me just quickly, explain that I'm not against open source. I'm actually very much for open source solutions, and of course I'm a big fan of Jan LeCun, and he is very much in favor of open source. And it is very dangerous if a technique is being developed in-house and it's not really being released, so no one really understands how it works. And not least from a security point of view, it would be super dangerous if we have simply only commercial solution that no one is open about, how they really work. If we instead, publish the source code, if we publish the weights, if we let people do research on these kind of models or the source code or the data is being trained on, then we can actually have a much higher security to start with. But not only that, the innovation we can get if we actually have open source solutions and open weight and open data would be significantly more. And that is what we've seen with, for example, TensorFlow as a package that was first private, and Google chose
Where
to
would we be
source
without TensorFlow?
Now it's expanded in innovation, and what you can use it for in so many ways, and even more PyTorch, of course, that Facebook and Meta and Jan LeCun and the gang, is releasing. So open source has so many benefits. So I just want to make that clear. But it's not always a super simple argument to make, and sometimes actually, I think it's actually easier to argue if you just look at the single company's value proposition saying, we want to have value for our users and that's it. Then I think it could potentially be hard to argue for open source. But if you have a more of a policy that you think, whatever. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's again, it boils down to, the quality and what you need that quality for very much too. I believe that's like a strong thing here. So, if your quality is or for some extreme precision area, perhaps, I don't know, like diagnostic area, then perhaps that quality, like a 1 or 2 percentile difference will really make a difference. But there is so much to digitize left. And, improvements there are really needed. So open source solutions offer pretty good solution there.
And they do work, right? I mean,
they do work.
They are surprisingly. There are a lot of bad open source out there, but there are surprisingly.
They do work. I'm just thinking, like, to bring some example. Recently, we tested some large language models for. In a RAG solution for question answering and support about...
Can you share which one you choose? LangChain or something? Or?
Yeah, there was like LangChain RAG solution. And the models that we tested there were Llama 3.1. Was also Mixtral 70. Mixtral 7.8. And I'm thinking Cohere for AI was the third one. And we benchmarked it as well with, at the time, that was 2023, so benchmarked it with ChatGPT 3.5. And interesting thing, what we have seen that we did this test for different level of question complexity, easier questions, that are like typically 1 or 2 sentence long. Open source models answer very good, actually. So you
compare it to normal ChatGPT then to 3.5?
We compared it. The GPT 3.5, let's say, solution is actually it for a simple questions with the context that we provided. Actually, it worked slightly worse for some of the simple questions, but it did work better for more complex questions.
But in 2023, Llama 3.1, that wasn't available then, was it? That's bad.
2023, yeah, our beginning of 2024, around that time.
Yeah. But I think,
I'm pretty sure we used Llama.
Okay.
But I think this is also where we can actually bring some insight to the table on here, because I think for the laymen who are not deep into this, it's very easy to go and understand that the efficiency and effectiveness and relevancy and the best results is all only about the model itself. And if I now take a little bit in what we have Anton Osika, who is sort of starting up and developing Lovable, and where he sort of argues, and I fully follow that line of thought, is that yes, the model is important, but if you really want to make something useful in production, there are so many other facets around fine-tuning, building the compound AI system, the UX, how you set it up. And so there are so many other nuances to work on than just to present, so his argument...
The old hidden technical depth paper
is the hidden technical depth of...
where the model is basically less than 5% of the system, and the most of the work is actually around it. And that is a lot with, speaking about prototypes and products, a lot of people still think the model is important, but in reality, it's the systems around it.
100% is... do you know the paper, right? The hidden
technical depth of machine learning.
There's a Google paper. It's old, right?
2015. Yeah.
2015, yeah. But the argument here is like, we damn need to understand all the facets of building AI compound systems, and therefore, most likely, for our purposes, if we use one of the open source models, maybe a couple of percentage worse as a model, but with all the fine tuning and doing everything, and now having the opportunity to tweak it because it's open, we get better results. And we should argue, we should talk equally about the other thing. It's just one brick in a large brick wall that makes this accurate.
I just want to highlight, the difference in that quality that we, typically we only look at the leaderboards. We see like this compressed top line there, and the difference actually is minuscule in some of the benchmarks. So so it's like you are looking at the last percentile there,
and it's the whole thing we can talk about. Papers chasing benchmark, is that research anymore?
Anyway, going on, I think it's
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
Awesome. So we usually have this kind of break in the middle of the podcast to speak about some recent news articles that we'd like to speak about. And we know we have some really big news happening. Which one should we choose to start with? Do you want to get started first, Henrik, or should we go with the big one?
I think we go with the big one first, and so we spend the time there, and then we see what we have time for after that.
Okay, so I think a lot of people heard about the Stargate. It's actually not a news. I think you heard about it in the beginning of last year, in like February in 2024, Microsoft spoke about some upcoming project called Stargate, and it's going to be, I think they said in that time, hundreds of billions of dollars being spent in building AI infrastructure. Now we heard on Tuesday, President Trump, together with Sam Altman and Oracle and SoftBank, together standing saying they're going to spend $500 billion in upcoming 4 years on AI infrastructure in the US. And it's going to bring hundreds of thousands of jobs to the American job market and so forth. So super big investment. And just to think, to try to understand the size of the budget here, $500 billion is basically the GDP of Sweden today.
Makes your head spin, no?
And is this Stargate or?
It's Stargate. So Stargate is a company that they're going to form. So it's a new company that's going to be called Stargate.
And Microsoft is part of that as well?
I think that the top three ones are actually Oracle. So Oracle is going to stand more for the infrastructure building part. So they have a cloud service, of course, which and they're going to do that. And then they have OpenAI, which is more for the AI training and inference and serving. And then they have SoftBank, the big investment company that stands for the money. And then Elon Musk is raging, saying, SoftBank will not have the money, etc. So who knows? But anyway, it's a super big thing, and the insane amounts of investments that are now being spent on AI infrastructure have never reached this kind of heights before. So we've seen, before hundreds of billions being spent. So we have Meta, saying they're spending $100 billion on their big 100,000 H100 clusters of machines, and XAI also had this big Colossus cluster, and they actually were the first to actually have 100,000 GPUs working synchronously or in a coherent way, which actually no one else can do to my knowledge. But now this is like 5 times more,
5x,
and on sizes that is so extreme, and these kind of super clusters are requiring so much energy that you can't really just plug it into the power grid, because it will drain the power from the rest of the state in US or something. So they need to have their own like nuclear power plants to be able to just keep
and
the
why?
lights on.
Why? Well, what is the what is the press release? What is Trump saying in terms of why we need it, or what are they aiming for?
Yeah, I wish I knew, or I have some ideas, but of course, we've seen extreme gains in companies that do make use of AI. They make insane amount of monies. If we now are seeing this extreme progress in AI, we potentially are getting closer to something called AGI, and this could actually be the starting ground where we have the building blocks for doing something that could be AGI in a couple of years.
I think the interesting question is whether other actors in US are also participating in it, in the same venture. Is it only ChatGPT, or other big actors as well are joining forces in the same? So
it's a great question, and I'm wondering a bit, given that Elon Musk and Trump is so close, and Elon was actually bashing about this, it sounded like Elon was a bit angry with Trump.
I'm not in the sandbox.
So potentially, Trump then went with Elon's competitors, which is Microsoft and OpenAI, and Elon is suing OpenAI, and they have this kind of beef. And even though Elon started OpenAI for a long while back. So I think potentially it could be start of something, some kind of argument, discussion, disconnect between Elon and Trump.
And how long has this been in the making? Probably Stargate and Oracle discussing with, this is not, they need to be been working in the background on this for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure Trump has talked about this with Elon to start with, but I don't think Elon liked it that much. So to your question, if other companies are involved, I would say partly, yes. We know they're partnering with Microsoft and NVIDIA, of course. And how are they just going to get all the GPUs for this? It's hard to get GPUs today already, and everyone is just building these extreme clusters. And now they're going to build this super one, and they have already started building it in Texas.
I wonder, if this would be some sort of venture that could include companies that are as well providing models that we see on the very top of the leaderboards there in US. So so I'm thinking Google, for instance.
I mean, like an ecosystem story.
Yeah,
where we are starting to layer.
If this effort is sort of aggregated from several actors, or is it just a promotion of one super actor? So that's an interesting question. What is it?
Yeah, then I certainly don't know the answer to that question. I think no.
But maybe I cannot do the roasting angle on this.
Yeah.
This is the death breath last effort for Oracle to keep being part of the game. They lost it. They lost the race. What the hell can we do in order to sort of get back in the game? And Oracle making a huge play.
Oracle has actually been top player.
I would not say. I think that Oracle is the biggest giant that is sleeping and sitting there and just counting money, because every single CRM database in the world is actually based on Oracle.
Not only that, for actually building AI infrastructure, Oracle has been a top player for a long time. Even Elon, was using them to start with before he did something.
This is true. So we get one view of who is the consumer perspective of this, and then we have the giants that sort of doing the work, the legwork in the back end. This is true. And then I think there's another angle here, where Oracle has the massive, as you said, cash cow for years, and there's a lot of Oracle databases out there, et cetera, and there's a lot of ERP system in Oracle. But now they need to find what is our position in this new, how do we become? Yeah, I'm just seeing it as maybe it's not the death breath roast rant is wrong. But
it's right. It's just the angle is not right.
they're finding a new. They need to find their position. They need to find their feet in this.
But I think another question here that's interesting is that the amount of money now necessary to be a player in the game of frontier AI is just increasing. It means, Henrik and I have been speaking about the AI gap for a long time, saying a few selected companies only have the money to actually be the premier
frontier models
player in building these kind of upcoming models. And this is actually just increasing that gap. And, imagine Europe trying to do this. It would be super hard. How could we even think about this? And then China, perhaps, and it will be super interesting to see what they come up with to try to, start not lag behind. But I think this is increasing the divide.
And more important than to understand, we're going to maybe come to the AI Commission later and all that. And we have always said we're going to be world-class in applying AI versus building AI. And clearly now, to find your feet, what to invest in and how to invest in, within this gap, some plays are very, stupid. I would argue you can't even do that game if you're not in that league. Yeah. So you need to figure out you find what do we mean when we say apply AI? Do we really mean building frontier models, or do we need? We had the Christmas special here, and we have sort of, when we are ranting with each other, we say maybe the world is like we have one or two frontier models, and we're going to be world class in building baby models or localized models. But to try to build the frontier model or try to do the baby model without having a starting point and then fine tune. We argued, there's a space where you have a frontier model like this, and then in the end we're going to have our baby models open source. So we're going to do everything open source, but the starting point, the training versus the inference and the fine tuning, what are we really needing to be good at? I think that whole game is really interesting where this is going.
It's more about fine tuning and distilling. You can use the output of these frontier models to train other models, and you can ask them to, now I want to have a text class categorization for the tax authority that understand these documents, and you can literally ask these super big models to produce a data set that you can then train your own potentially open source or some other models that is super small, super cheap to run, and is very safe because you train it yourself.
Yeah, so it's the whole argument with forking distillation, but not but understanding your place in the value chain, so to speak.
Okay.
This is just, this is useful, almost like you're trying to look around the corner. What is the feasible position to take?
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the size of investments alone, it's very disheartening because they don't compare, or they do not match to the investment that the rest of the world is putting. And I think
we need to play another game. We cannot play that
exactly.
game.
That's not the game that you can play now. Hopefully, it's something that converging the right situation and time. You can still come into that game later, but it's probably not the game that you can play in 2025.
Just to elaborate on that, I mean, like, look how. I can see how, with the pride and the politics and the sort of pride before fall, or whatever you call it, we need to do the European frontier model, and we're gonna compete with Stargate, and then you look at the investment, which is a 10th, maximum
100th.
A hundredth of it. So then
it's a 3 billion, right? Or how big is the European?
I mean, if you take the AI factory investment was 1.5 billion. It's like
but let's say let's speculate that everybody wakes up in Europe and say, are we going to go all in on this? And then they say they're going to go all in, and they go all in on it. They put all the chips on the table in the poker game. There will still be a 10th.
Or less,
lower or less. And even then it's like, is that the right game to play? Is that where you're going to put your markers on? Or do you need to be playing this game
even
smarter?
These kind of super big frontier models, they would be so expensive to use. So no one, even in US, normal companies will not use this model. So that's not really what we should aim for. I mean, we need to, I think, realize we will have different classes. Some super class over here, but that's not what normal companies will use because it's too expensive. So the companies or countries that start to be the best to build practically useful
applications
and models.
And models. So they're distilling out models that are useful from the bigger super intelligence.
And they will win big.
Yeah, you hear we have an argument. We have an ongoing debate on this.
I'm thinking Microsoft, showing the way and partnering with OpenAI, and then using it in all their applications. That's a sort of success story. It's
But the interesting thing, because for me it's always follow the money, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they said we're going to invest $500
billion.
Right, but not exactly immediately.
No, 4 years.
Okay, in 4 years. So first we need to put
100 billion first.
100 billion. Okay, good. So that means that we need to take out of our pocket 100 million and pay.
Billion.
Yes. Okay, good. So Trump announces this. What do you think it happens with the stocks of these companies?
Yeah, Oracle jumped like 7% or something.
8%. So now, what is basically 8% increase in stock price
100 billion
will result in a market capitalization. So current capitalization is 515.26 billion times 108. That will bring them to 556.48 billion. The difference is that it's 41 billion. 41 billion.
So the announcement
but then you have SoftBank and Microsoft that also rose.
Yeah.
So basically
they didn't
invest in anything. Did they?
They won.
That's a good funny.
I'm looking at this.
You're creating your own destiny.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these days you don't need to actually invest money. You just need to say that you're going to invest in something. The stock is going up.
Then you use it.
That's actually a very good point.
Europe are so bad at playing this game. We suck at playing this game.
I think that Europe should say we are going to be the best in AI, and then the stock goes up, and then we use this money to make a great.
Let me then take another news story that sort of follows into this, but it's not directly related. I've been following a guy called Connor Grennan. He's from the New York University Stern School of Business, but he has some interesting, angles. He made a really nice post and highlighted, have you seen how Microsoft versus Google now have announced pricing changes to how to do models and how you buy models in enterprise or whatever? and they're actually going 2 different pricing strategies. And in a nutshell, Google is basically making AI ubiquitous with a very small increase in hike in pricing. They use putting it everywhere, and they are trying to get to market penetration by sort of just having it there. But because it's there, people are going to use it. And that is a slight small increase, so they're investing their way into the market like this. Where Microsoft is almost going the opposite strategy, where it's a little bit like we're pricing it so you can switch it on service by service. So you can be much more surgical in where you want to use your AI costing. So both are about how do we increase penetration, how do we actually get usage out of it, both are strategies that is about lowering the barrier to start using the AI, but vastly different pricing approaches. And I find that really interesting, and I'm not sure how many people have really picked up on this, that this is happening right now. So that also has an implication when you look at these type of vendors. What type of vendor do you want? Do you want to have a micro payment, surgically, or do you want it to just be there and I don't need to worry about it? Did you pick up on this one?
Yes, yeah. I have some opinions here.
Yeah, please.
As usual.
Yeah. So please. What's your take on this?
I think Google is doing something smarter, but
the
idea is, if we have a normal company, they always have budget issues, and how should we invest in something? Can we really invest in this or not? If you take the Microsoft approach, it means you need to increase spending.
You need to be sharp in why you need it and all that.
But you need to increase spending. And that requires some actions to take. And that means that it's harder to cross that threshold to start using AI. Yeah. Because then you don't get AI. And if you don't get people to use it, you don't get them hooked on it. Now, Google, you simply get it for free, at least to some extent, not full extent.
Super cheap, but it's automatically used there.
So then people start using it, and they hook people, and they get them locked in, and then they buy more. So for me, it's kind of obvious what the best way is here, and we'll see what happens. But I think, for me at least, it's one approach is smart, the other is questionable.
Yeah, but and one is pay as you go, and one is like all in and get them hooked. But
all in
really.
is closer to Swedish mentality, and
we don't need to worry about
smorgasbord.
What Google is taking away the decision altogether. This is the play that why you think is smart.
It's a free tier, basically.
It's a free tier.
It's not free, but it's free.
Yeah, but
it's available. Right?
So Microsoft is trying to minimize the decision. Google is trying to take away the decision.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line of these 2 pricing strategies.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Cool stuff. Did you have anything?
I'm thinking this is maybe not a very new news. This is from 2024 still. So DeepSeek released a model, and the major news there was for a significantly cheaper price than what comparable models would normally cost. And if I remember numbers correctly, that was something along the lines of $5 million for training a model that is comparable to, I think, Llama 3.3, 400 billion parameter model, which in price was significantly higher. So talking about this, in 2025, we do not have an opportunity in Europe or in Sweden, perhaps, to, have our own model, but, different elements converging to, the price of it, open source, and maybe the bigger interest and more vigor, and being more vigorous in investment, maybe it could happen that we will have once opportunity like that. Well, it's, let's say, partially wishful thinking, or as Göran said, building your own future, forming your own future there.
But we never talked about the model properly. We never really talked about this model properly.
But DeepSeek had done many things, and it's impressive Chinese company, and I think which one you refer to. I thought you were going to say something else, but they did, as you said, release something late last year. But they also released something last week. And that is the R1.
R1.
Yes. So what they have done now is basically an open source version. They released everything open source.
Also for the same price.
It's
or
free.
less.
I mean, it's free. I mean, they have an
No,
API.
I mean the training of the model. How much does that cost? That was like the major.
Okay, if you want to train
benchmark, yes. Like how much does it cost to train a model like that?
Okay.
And they at least they claim that this costs that little.
Yeah, I mean it's a much smaller model, so they basically have surpassed or been equal to, on par with O1. So O1 is the latest OpenAI model, right? That they have, that is reasoning model. And they basically have the R1, and they actually released how they did it. And OpenAI has not, because it's closed. But they actually have now a Chinese company that released something that performs as good in coding, in reasoning, in math, which OpenAI is doing, and it's much smaller. I think actually they cheated a bit. They also are...
In which way?
But they started from a pre-trained model, so they used the Quen model. There's another open source Chinese model, and then they said they trained it without any data at all. They had like this kind of zero approach or something, but it's not true because they use a pre-trained model. But then they have this kind of reinforcement learning approach in trying to make it reason, and I found that super interesting. And it's much smaller. It's equally good in performance, similar to what we spoke of before in open source. And it's very tempting, I would say, for any company to say, here is a model, it's free, and open.
Really open.
And O1 is super expensive. If you want to use O1, I think it's like 10 times more expensive.
Well, the pro version is $200 or something.
But that's not what I'm speaking about. So if you want to use O1 through the APIs, for example, it's about 10 times more expensive than the GPT-4o. So it's super expensive. And the more tokens it produces, the more expensive it will be. Now you have an alternative that is free if you host it yourself. I mean, you have to pay for the hardware, but you don't have to pay a vendor. And it's performing equally well, and it's smaller. It's kind of impressive. And then you start thinking, okay, why is China doing this? But I'm not going to go into that question, but it is still impressive to see that they've been able to do this, reach frontier model performance, and released it.
But let me poke a little bit about that, what you not want to go into. As a layman, if I take a model, and I say it's open, but then I download it and I put it in my hardware, in all that stuff. Is it still something that could be scary here?
I'm not going to comment on that. Maybe you can guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I imagine there are backdoors and things that could be scary. But on paper, it's not enough just to take it home and then you're safe.
But let me say something obvious then. I mean, if you were to ask the model something about culture.
Okay.
The
model has its values.
It has its biases, of course.
Okay, so we have, we talked about the wokeism of the Google model, and here we have another bias.
Naturally, right?
Yeah. Clear. I know. That's the obvious, of course, angle. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of another angle of sort of evaluating these models, and sort of that we have saturated benchmarks basically that can tell us anything of how good those models are. So this is something that open source community and academia needs to really step up and catch up there. Basically, there's no alternative for I don't know, public sector, for instance. So we rely on the benchmarks heavily. I'm thinking like also perhaps within the news, or that a recent interesting way of benchmark was released. Now I'm thinking from, it's a long name of university. It's called AI University. Joran, if you manage to find it. AI University, and the framework is called 360 something. A framework is called 360. And there they try to cover training aspects, like being able to look at the weights during training and various evaluation
but you
issues.
You're opening up a rabbit hole here on where do we need to go with benchmark for them to be meaningful and to really understand better selection.
Yeah, even without going deep there, what's interesting from their paper is that they showed like a broader spectrum on which you can possibly test models, and the leaderboard top models actually start to diversify according to that test framework. So it's not necessarily that this is a specific feature that you maybe want to release your product on, but it's a very good insight feature to understand about truthfulness and things like that.
It's tough when you have a system that is growing exponentially in performance, and then you need to.
Is this from Copenhagen?
No, not from
AI 360, expert evaluation of future implication of AI.
Framework 360, AI University, and.
All right, we will find it then.
Yep. Any case, but luckily, we can always make harder benchmarks. So even if it's harder than any human can do, we can still create benchmarks, right? That is more difficult.
Right.
But it is a bit challenging because you can't really double check as a human anymore.
What's interesting is, out of those scientific studies that looked into, what value the large language models bring, so the way how they construct these studies, I think the most famous studies looked at the center call sort of effect optimization and even researcher optimization, so generating research ideas. And one interesting thing that I thought that those studies showed up, that the remaining task that you still spend a lot of time is judgment, so we are sort of let's say goodish at judgment. Creativity is starting to be an aspect that might be surpassed. So it's it's interesting. So from that judgment perspective and that testing perspective, this is something that remotely binds. Probably it's an interesting area for research to delve in.
And just going back, I think the question of benchmarks and what do we do when AI is better than humans, and how can we create benchmarks that are trying to match something that we can't evaluate as humans? But actually, it's not that hard, and I get annoyed sometimes when people say we will never know if AI is smarter than humans, but we will. And I remember a project we did in. This was 2019-20 or something, and it was basically trying to do this kind of CAT scan semantic segmentation, trying to identify if a tumor or not in a CAT scan image of the brain. And then had humans that circled in the tumor, and we could see that when you have expert humans, these were the best humans you can think of that try to identify if it's tumor or not, or bad tumor or not. And we can see it's about 85% consistency between humans. So they do errors, between humans. So we know if two expert humans are trying to do the same task, they are 85% equal, but 15% wrong. So then we had models, and we did that ourselves. We had models that trained and became 84% accurate. And then you think, okay, can we get to 90? No, it's not possible, because we know it's 50% error in the training data, in the test data that we have. But then you can think even more, well, can we fix that? Well, yes, you can. It's actually not that hard to use synthetic data. We can actually know in advance that, okay, we have a tumor here, and we generate data from that, and then we just make it harder and harder to detect, but we still know the answer. So then you can know the answer, and it's rather easy to create a data set for that. And this is similar to AlphaGo or whatnot.
And so sort of introducing noise into that data set.
So, I get a bit annoyed sometimes when people think that we can't create benchmarks, or we can't create data once it becomes superhuman. But
could it be because we think of this way, what I can from my own sort of human capacity and perspective? But there is a way of formalizing kind of, I don't know, I would say anything. So if you formalize, I mean, if you define the problem, there is a way of formalizing it, and there is a way of approaching and solving it. So.
And it's actually similar to how O1 and R1 actually is doing it. And now we have actually a paper about this from DeepSeek, how they are doing it, because it is based on synthetic data that they are training themselves and generating and then training on their own synthetic data, and in that way of achieving this kind of performance. So we see, time and time again, it works. And of course, there is no lack of data. So I hate and I wish people stop saying there is no more data to train on. There is easily how much data we want to train on.
All right. The one thing that I like that people would stop saying is that we should specialize in that extreme way that we even stop doing proof of concepts. Here is something maybe bringing controversy into this discussion.
That's a good one. That's
okay.
Nice. I like that.
But perhaps we should go back to the discussion. We have a number of topics that I wish we can cover with you as well before we finish off here. Which one should we take here? We have the Swedish AI Commission, and do you have any thoughts about their insights? They released a report before Christmas.
I don't know. I think in general, I think it's a positive and welcome and sort of awaited step in a way that you want some signal, you want some determination in this, and I think, should the Swedish government invest into that the way how it's proposed? It would be fantastic. There are 75 proposed ideas in there, in like a very large number.
With concrete budgets.
Basically, concrete budgets, concrete actions. Super impressive. One area that I strongly support personally is, of course, research and academia. That is never a bad idea.
Isn't it? If you were to choose, though, is it always good to invest in research, or are there times where it's good to invest in engineering?
Of course, engineering is also super important. I'm just thinking, from the angle from where you can find budget in for solving those problems. So, as long as, research is staying in sort of public sector, it's great to have financing also, like in the public sector's way of financing it.
I have to disagree a little bit here. So even though I have an academic background as you, I think, we in Sweden at least, we have invested far too much in research and far too little in engineering. And I usually compare it to tech companies that are, the extreme valuation. They are the top valued from a market cap point of view companies in the world. What they are doing, I would argue, is at least spending 10 times more in engineering efforts than in research efforts.
But they are doing it with the people that have been trained in
engineering, yes, not necessarily trained in research. No,
but this is a little bit like, to invest in research is good, and the angle we have been discussing when we looked at the AI Commission. Okay, tick a lot of tick boxes, but we were dissecting it. Where are the blind spots?
Okay, interesting.
And if you start by looking at who has contributed to the commission, we have good coverage of the arguments on research, and we have good coverage on CEO level, but there's not many CTOs or hardcore engineers. And the one that I think, the one guest that actually framed this the best was Sverker Jansson. Do you know Sverker?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he basically highlighted the one of the big difference between Silicon Valley or the American ecosystem and the Swedish ecosystem is that they have, the large tech giants are literally spewing out engineers that knows what AI engineering at scale or data engineering at scale looks like. So it's basically not only the research community, but it's actually who knows how to deal with, $1 billion, these large language models, who knows how to build compound AI systems. And it's a little bit like contrasting research, PhDs versus the guy that makes Spotify tick. So, and in this context, then, it's not about that the research idea is never a bad idea. I agree. I could not underscore it more, but I think there is not enough. We don't have critical mass of engineers.
We are way much better than in other EU countries in Sweden with regard to that. So,
but in compared to where the tech giants are then building an ecosystem, and where people are taking this knowledge of engineering and then infusing it in the next startup or in the next JP Morgan bank, because they worked at Google and now they work at the bank.
Just to understand, what did you mean that we are better in Sweden compared to other EU companies? Just to understand.
EU companies, not companies, countries.
Okay, so what are we better in the country of Sweden?
I'm thinking, for instance, if you look at the AI index,
that we are going further and further down.
Yes, we are going further and further down, but there are some elements that are sort of giving hope, and for me those elements are more people skills, and that, let's say, that index itself, it's built on the number of criteria that are really sort of hard to match. Some of them are, incomparable in between. Like, there could be as small as a criteria as, like, saying the number of papers in this particular conference. And then, another criteria could be investment from private sector. Like that big of a discrepancy between the criteria. And among those criterias, one is, the strength of sort of open source community and the code repos inside the country. And that, I think, is it's a strong indicator, which is.
Are we better at that in Sweden, you say, and compared to other countries?
So let's say, if you look at that AI index, then I interpret it like that. I find like the profile that is almost the same. There are three countries that look, or like two countries that look exactly the same, like Sweden, over the certain criteria span. One is Malaysia and one is Poland.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting, right? So Malaysia has less code repos. Poland has more. We are more or less at the same level, more or less the same profile. Poland being a much larger country than Sweden. So this sort of saturation of engineers, it's not that bad. I think the human factor and education is like extremely important for Sweden. I think it is the supporting factor that is critical for Sweden's ambition to ever go and move along the ladder there.
So what I can give you some example. I think Sweden is rather good in some aspects. I don't think in AI in general, because I think we are going down, unfortunately, and we are decreasing and below Nordic other countries these days, and that's really unfortunate, I think. But we are rather good.
Are there some particular measures that you would like index, to refer?
That in itself, but it's number of measures for that. But
it's like Gardner, depending on how the questions are, so how you measure this.
I guess.
Yeah.
But it's no question what the trend is. So, and then we can just see the investments from government, for example. If you compare that to Nordic countries, it's easy to see that Sweden is actually much less than Denmark, Norway, and Finland. So it's kind of easy to see in a number of ways that we are not investing as much and not seeing the traction that other Nordic countries are doing in AI. And that's really sad, I think. But we have a great opportunity, I think, to be good in Sweden. So we have awesome universities, I think, for example. So talent access is actually very good, I would say, in Sweden. We actually have a rather good startup capital, venture capital available in Sweden. Compared to also Nordic countries. And so we have a lot of opportunities and preconditions that should make it possible for us to also make AI work. But I think we're lacking the leadership and the incentives and the budget and investments that we should have to make it happen.
Yeah, on this last sentence, we agree 100%, or we align 100%. I'm thinking, like, when I look into like sort of analysis and indexes like that, and I see the comparison between Sweden and Finland, and I see how sort of sensitive those criteria are. Like they are jumping from year to year. So even if you see the trend for a while, like for the last 2 years, that maybe is now tilting to Finland's side better, these are not like fundamentally deciding criteria.
Take investment from government.
I have a comment here. So why towards Finland? What has Finland invested in the past 2 years except selling silo to AMD? So I'm serious about this because
they had a super big investment
in 2018 and 2019. Yes,
17.
exactly. But that is a decade ago almost. So why does it have to have a measure with what they're doing today?
Even one in Sweden.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, right?
It does matter,
why it will be tilting towards if they have not done anything? I mean, I like Finland, but
I like Finland as well.
I'm just saying, like, I do not understand how these things are actually put in practice. So you have Norway, Denmark last year, supercomputer. Norway, $1 billion to digitalization. It was not specified that it's going to be for AI. It's only one paragraph in the whole report that says for AI. Yeah, it was for digitalization purposes. So how?
Okay, I thought it was for AI. So
no, it's a digitalization budget.
Okay,
that can be infrastructure for railways, if you want to say it, or as Svanberg will say, IoT. So
go for a normal indexes then, and just compare how it looks like. And
true. But I'm just saying, like, I don't see how these indexes are actually done. So
can I steal this? We started into this AI Commission. A lot of good things tick in the box. An argument that we wanted to test you on the engineering. We kind of didn't fly or flew. I want to move on from this angle. I'm not sure if it's in the commission itself, but around this conversation, there's also been a lot of the conversation. Now we need to build a central infrastructure in Sweden.
Yes, that's another big take.
Yeah, and then we have had the different political statements. We need to have key authorities looking into where this to go, and our civil minister, what's his name? I forget his name. Our AI lead in the vad heter han? Erik Slottner made a statement, and I was just wanting to, if you could comment on it, because in between the lines here, or I've read, but I don't know the details here. We want different authorities that we think are leading to take the lead in detailing and discussing and taking the baton, so to speak, to work more detail on this, and I've seen Skatteverket
is listed among them. Yes,
and among them. Could you elaborate on could you help me to connect the dots on what I'm actually talking about, and what is the actual thing you've been listed to do, or and are you working on something that you could share?
Yeah, so the name that is in that report is AI Verkstan in Swedish, which could be approximately translated to AI workshop. It's so near to what EU talks about AI factory, but it's not that.
It's not that.
It's not that. Yeah. It's something else. So this AI workshop is a proposal that came from Skatteverket together with the Försäkringskassa. Let's translate this on the fly.
I should know that.
Insurance
agency.
The insurance agency.
Yes, and the idea of that proposal is that yes, the agencies should take a lead for building infrastructure that they need for themselves. To develop and deploy and scale AI applications that even other agencies could make use of. So it's not for general research. It's not for training large language model in Sweden. It's none of those goals. It's an infrastructure in which we could securely and robustly develop AI applications in public sector. So that's the purpose in a nutshell.
And is this now put into action? Is this ideas? Is it something that we are now working on detailing, getting a budget behind, or where are we in the process from idea to
It's
conception?
an idea that has been,
Were you part of that idea, by the way?
that's an idea that came out of the discussions and working together between those agencies. It is waiting for a signal from a government decision. So it is something that you can prepare for, but it's something that needs an initial commitment from the government. So this is what the status is now.
It's very interesting, though.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but there has been so many conversations on. I read another paper coming out of Gothenburg University. This is more informatics, where they're trying to highlight the conundrums by trying to do things, digitalization, data, and AI, in a very municipal way and very scattered way. And there's been these arguments: we need central infrastructure. I like that idea, but I think you need to be very nuanced on that idea. If you try to build a central monolith that that has a lot of that should sort of service everyone, I think you're going in the wrong path. If you have some sort of distributed architecture where you have a platform technology that then other domains can utilize, how we understand central infrastructure is tricky. You know what I mean? So it's this pendulum from decentralized to centralized. That is one dimension that people who doesn't know this is thinking, and then you have all the versions in between where you have platform versus domains and all this. So this is why I think it's super important that we discuss central infrastructure, but more importantly, what do we really mean with it, and in what way should someone centrally serve someone locally?
Absolutely. And with that, there are also legislative let's say hurdles about, for instance, sharing data. We are speaking about sharing data now for many years, and it's really hard to find the path forward, and we very often come back to that, okay, the legislation needs to change. So, for instance, public authorities could exchange. So, the way how it's being done today, it's,
machines.
It's upon a specific request, basically, on a request basis, on a new legislation basis. So, EU comes with a requirement, okay, you need to do that, then you find this sort of exception in the law, and then you do it.
But if I'm provocative here, now we're also talking hardcore different types of data engineering patterns, how we understand this, and we're basically solving this problem that we all hide behind the law that we can't do anything. I think it's a load of crap, because if I go to a bank or if I go to any other regulated, like in electricity, we have unbundling. So we need to have data which is for the network operator versus data that is for the retailer, and they cannot share this data. Unbundling law. Technically, we solved that many years ago. So I think here also is a little bit like, this is about understanding the identity of what the platform should be doing and what we should not be doing, and how we provide infrastructure and ways of working that allows us to have data contracts as ways to share this. So we simplify for the domains to do this work without doing all the heavy lifting. So I think I get really annoyed when it's a very shallow conversation, we can't share data, and a very uninitiated conversation, we can't share data, when technically yes you can, but not in the straightforward way. You need to think around this, and then I can hook you up and you can get people who knows how to solve this today, and it's been solved many years ago. I have an example. Enel has distributed DSOs, like network operators, in 40 countries. Okay, they can of course they need to do the regulatory stuff in each country. At the same time, Enel is a large conglomerate, and they need to be able to have all the data. Solved many years ago. So
I partly disagree, but still, it's.
I think there is a much more nuanced conversation to be had here, where engineers that looks at this topic.
It's one of those topics that, yes, there is definitely a need for more open discussion there. To that end, I agree. I'm thinking, like facilitating, applications and, I've found patterns in one public organization, could be also a viable way of how you can do it in another one. Because, we use... Of course,
we need to be able to modularize, we need to be able to harvest and reuse, and we need to build it by design this way.
It's a question of, like bringing the standard up and, like opening the discussion about data sharing. It's a lot of questions there. And the same security, sovereignty, robustness, everything comes into, But it's it's an open discussion that is needed for this.
But the way I've heard this conversation, we need to move on. All right, move on. I sip it there.
So time is flying away here, and I'd like to have at least a few topics before we end on a more philosophical one. I'd like to go a bit more into regulation, if that's okay with you.
All right.
And we have, if we take the EU AI Act and start with that, do you have any thoughts about that? Is it something that the tax authority, which I'm sure they do, of course, but can you just elaborate? What's your thoughts, the pros and cons with the EU AI Act?
Okay, so first I need to declare like how much of that I know about. So, and this is not much. So I'm not a legally sort of educated.
No,
not jurist, and so.
I think all of us are amateurs in that space.
Exactly. So take it with a grain of salt. But I have been participating in something that is called proof of concept sandbox. For public authorities, and that's a sort of collaboration and case-based proof of concept where you take in a particular AI development idea and then you analyze it in the light of the AI Act. So if it's okay, we can start there and just see like how actually we are doing it now.
Is it part of the normal AI Act sandboxes idea?
So it's a proof of concept. And Sweden is currently developing the sandbox. There is, an expert group set up in Sweden that is working on the topic, like how to interpret it and like prepare the method, actually how it will be implemented, and so think of it as a pre-stage. So my experience is in that pre-stage, in a proof of concept type of way. So the way how I have been in one iteration and now we started another iteration. So my experience there is like that you like different public authority sort of lawyer experts come in together with an authority that is presenting a particular idea. And there you analyze the sort of important steps that we initially think, or the lawyers initially think will be critical. And those steps are like, for instance, the definition of AI. So you go through the definition of AI, you go through a risk assessment profile, and then you go through roles, and you sort of discuss along the way and try to find, the path for a particular, AI project idea. Where does it land in that matrix? And what does it mean for a public authority? What if you have a development like that? What are your commitments to public? What do you need to be, for instance, transparent about, or what you need to document, and things like that? Or maybe even what you cannot do. So you need to stop developing it. Right. And from my experience, it looks, talking about the developmental process, it looks very much design heavy approach.
Waterfall.
Design heavy, so it's or waterfall. Yeah, but so I'm thinking, so far, we are not seeing the way of how it could be done iteratively in the way that we are developing software nowadays. In Sweden. So, for instance, in the agile working set, where you start with the smaller version of the project with this minimal viable product, and then you iterate and go on and on. You basically need to have a fairly good idea of what you want to develop before.
But that would never fly.
Otherwise...
Technically, that would never fly, because you have a use case life cycle where you need to do stuff in order to know more stuff in order to actually like this. And it's the simplest. What do you need to do in the ideation?
But hang on, I think it's possible to do it in an agile way this way.
This is what I mean.
I think it's possible.
It is not possible to do in a waterfall way. You cannot solve every question up front. Impossible.
Absolutely, I agreed on that. But
so I'm saying the agile or the use case lifecycle way and securing what do I need to do in order to fail fast in ideation space, then what I need to do in order to validate design, what do I need to do at deploy.
But let's hear, I want to hear what you have, practically started doing. So have you actually sat in some kind of workshop, have some meetings about this?
Yeah, so these are like in a form of meetings, and then you sort of discuss a project idea. I'm thinking.
Can you give some example of some meeting you had, or just concretely try to understand?
Like you mean in the way how the meeting goes, or like
did you speak about specific use case, some specific proof of concept that you were discussing? Or?
Yeah, for instance, the iteration that has already finished has been about the ESV, economic styrningsverksamhet, how we translate that on the fly.
Yes.
But was it a specific AI application, or was it more that they took their...
So basically you have an idea. They were talking about, for instance, the gathering input for a specific governmental call for all the agencies to respond and come with the feedback in, right? And for instance, the other iteration that I am in now, it's about a case that is about a business case that is being developed in Swedish Tax Authority. And it's about fighting crime. So it's like a more complex system that has various components in it. So that's, for instance, another
But do I understand it correctly? I mean, I think the sandbox idea that is being presented along with the AI Act is a great idea, and I hope that that could help companies to try out stuff and say that if we want to do this, here is a methodology, here are some experts, here are some kind of best practices you should follow, a checklist in the best case, simply saying, if you do this. If you want to do this, then you have to do that and that and that. And in some cases, you can't do it. Is that what do you think is happening here? Or
so let's say this is like a one plane, and now I actually want to couple that back to what Henrik said, because you mentioned, this will never fly. Another sort of plane that is missing there is that you need to basically take in more, the engineering part of you, and see how you can make it work in this fast development cycle way. So I don't know how
does it work today? I still don't really understand how it works today.
So today the proof of concept takes approximately 3 months.
To go through a single case? Or?
To go through a single case, you meet very rarely.
On paper? Only on
paper. You meet very rarely.
And that's it.
And it's developing the ideas for the method. So I'm not saying that this is how it's gonna work in the reality. So currently it's on the stage where it's trying to interpret the AI Act sort of directly to the project idea, and that's the stage, but it's not in the state where it could take a project that is sort of to be developed and take into account the agile development cycle. So, you know, something that you can sort of get a feedback after, like, or maybe, you know, like mark and return.
Can I try an idea on you? And, you know, I think, you know, some people are just complaining about GDPR and AI Act, saying, you know, they are just an hindrance, etc.
Are you one of them?
No, I have been, I think. But I think actually it is possible to be compliant in a rather efficient way.
Yes,
I think it's possible to comply with a lot of regulation in a rather efficient way if you just know how. And normally, you know, what's required if you take GDPR or something is that you have documentation in place, that you have done the risk assessments, and you can show a legal basis and whatnot. If you just do that early on, and I like to use the term shift left. Shift left usually come from a security point of view. So if you have like cybersecurity policies, then a bad way would say that first you develop the whole product, and then before deployment, you go do a security check. That would be a horrible thing to do, right? So what you want to do is to start doing security by design, as you usually call it. So you're shifting it left in the development process to have it even in a first MVP, even perhaps before the MVP, you actually have security in place. And I think you can do the same with regulation. And then it's actually very easy. If if you simply said like this, I want to have a GitHub repo where security and GDPR and AI Act is in place to start with. This is the starting place. And here is, you know, the documentation necessary. Here is the risk assessment for this kind of hello world kind of application or whatever. And now if you make a small change, then you may need to update the risk assessment a slight bit.
That's a beautiful solution, no?
Right.
That's
an
really
agile
nice.
approach to being compliant.
Yeah.
And that is actually doable.
Yeah.
And so the whole shift left, the whole security by design, compliant by design, it is not that hard, but you need to have deep engineering expertise to understand what this conversation is all about. So it's interesting then to understand who are talking about these topics, what is the construct of this working group, and how many engineers are in there who has a deep understanding for...
No, so we imagine that this is like a preparation step, and the very big interest is, of course, from the, you know, legislative domain itself. They themselves need to understand how to sort of interpret it.
Yeah, but this is the core challenge then, is that we had Petra Dalunde here who's working on the TEF in RISE as an example.
Yeah, they're going to be also big actors in this.
Of course, right? And the core story here that was very obvious when we had the conversation here is that this is a cross-disciplinary problem, so it's madness to have lawyers to talk about this first and then trying to get the engineers in to work with the idiocy that the lawyers has come up, and it's madness to do the opposite. We know AI and data is a cross-disciplinary problem, so you need to shape. So I'm getting scared when I hear lawyers get their hands on it first, to be honest, because they have no clue on how to make it into a practical solution. And Anders outlined it. Well, if we look at shift left, I can continue. You have a risk, model risk, you have data risk, you have compound system risk, you have organizational risk, you have governance risk. This is old school stuff we know, right? And you have a model, and then you need to do certain things in order to be safe in ideation space. And then you need to do other things to show that you're safe at deploy. And then you need to do other things to show that you're safe in monitor or model drift and all that. So I think the core message is this needs to be a cross-disciplinary effort from the start. And I get scared when I hear lawyers are looking at it first.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, you know, you sort of start noticing, like after being in iteration, that it lacks this sort of
applicability. How will this work in practice for engineers?
Well, sort of agile, or development angle. Let's say.
How will we take this, what the lawyers has cooked up, and make it practical in terms of building systems? And I think I would flip it. How does real software engineering lifecycle look like? And then ultimately, how can we now be compliant to that or safe to that? And actually, in my opinion, is by design. It's not cheap. You're going to be, the total cost of ownership will probably be better. Like fixing data quality up front is better.
Yeah.
I heard a bit about how Tesla is approaching this, and SpaceX, which is heavily regulated industries, in the space industry and automotive industry. And I heard something in SpaceX once, and they got a regulation saying they have to look out for seals that may be stressed and be depressed because of the sound when they cross the sound barrier, and it's some kind of sound that happens. So they had to prove from a regulatory point of view that seals don't get depressed from the sound. So what did they do? They went out to sea, they kidnapped a seal, brought it into a laboratory, put headphones on the ears of the seal, and did experimentation on it, and made it show that no, they don't care that much about the sound. And then they were compliant with the regulation. But they did this as a part of the software process itself.
As a design
plan. And then, once done it once, and if they make a change somewhere, they know it is just, okay, we have the full smorgasbord, or we have the full palette or portfolio of regulation, confirmation
approaches.
Yeah, solutions that they have built. And if they make a small change in the water pump of a Tesla car, the only thing they care about is to see what kind of regulation could this water pump affect. And they have to, if they make a small change in the water pump, they have to also do directly the regulation aspect, which means that they actually send in to the regulatory authorities daily changes. And they are minuscule, super small changes in the regulation or regulatory compliance work, which means that they can in a single day be compliant with something they put in production the same day. It is a completely different way to send in for compliance in when it's done, and instead do it for every minuscule change.
Yeah.
And that makes it possible for them to be so much quicker.
I am thinking, what Henrik pointed out. It's this topic of sort of AI Act and, AI regulation is, everybody in society should be involved into this, so it's, it's coming now from sort of legislative, colleagues, because, it has been a domain of legislation for them. So, they might seem to be natural actors there. But I think, for instance,
the right actors
the
to put it
things,
in production.
That you mentioned, it's also, it's also maybe something for, open source community to step up and also bring forward solutions. And I'm thinking Sweden is not the only country that has to solve it as well. There are other countries in EU that also need to come up with the regulatory sandboxes. So it's yeah.
But I think one argument has also been, what do we actually mean with the regulatory sandbox? Or what has been the vision, or do we have a definition of it today? Because this has also been a little bit like, is it just checklist, or do we want to be able to bring code in there to look for bias? What do we mean?
Yeah, so the definition we can ask your to look and take it up. It's it's an enormous document, 140 plus pages. So it's. It's interesting from the perspective to see, how sort of other domain colleagues crack through it, and what do they think of it?
Do you want to hear ChatGPT's description of an AI Act sandbox? So they say the EU AI Act sandbox is a controlled environment where companies, researchers, and public institutions can experiment with AI systems, right? While ensuring compliance with the upcoming EU AI Act. Okay.
But that to me is more than checklists.
Yes.
So this is what we were arguing on this workshop that we were having, because to many, if I understood correctly, when I asked the question, what is the sandbox? To many, it seems like it's a survey. You go to Google questionnaire. So are you compliant? Yes. Which risk? 3. Good. Move on. This is a little bit more sophisticated, and I think every country should have a sandbox like that.
Yeah, they are forced to, actually.
Yes. You have an environment where you can actually develop your models. You develop them there, it's safe. I think this is really good.
And they have a section like, how does it work then? Well, they have regulatory guidance, meaning experts helping companies and participants to understand, how it aligns with the act. That's good, right? It's consultancy, basically, right? They have risk assessment, which you have to do as well, of course, to be compliant. Testing for biases, fairness, safety, and whatnot. They have compliance testing, so they can, see what they have to tweak to basically be compliant. and then they call it innovation friendly. I would potentially challenge this, but but they want to have the sandbox to avoid killing innovation and then being open to be more innovative. But I think potentially this idea, if they can make this work, is actually innovation friendly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
so if you take safe and smooth innovation as a key prerogative, because if you're honest, if you go to a medium-sized enterprise in Sweden or a municipality, they are not so good at innovation either, right?
And probably they don't have capacity for.
They might need a guidance to innovate safely. It's the compliance is very important. It's the underlying foundation, but actually, how do you go about safe and smooth innovation and adoption? Where do you start? We want to do a system. Well, you kind of need to sort out different things in different stages. And if you've built a lot of products, you kind of know this. But a municipality is not that.
Perhaps we need an AGI to be able to be compliant with the AI Act. What do you think?
That also would be a beautiful solution, though.
I don't think it's a stupid idea.
Well, I'm thinking probably we will have an AGI regulatory.
We could have a normal AI chatbot that at least guide us through the process of becoming compliant. I think actually it's not a super stupid idea. Speaking about AGI, and the time is flying away, I'd like to test a more philosophical question to you. And we normally always ask and end with this kind of question. So assume that AGI will happen at some point. Do you have a date or number of years in mind when potentially we will have an AGI?
I'm thinking, I don't know, you can be as optimistic as 2-3 years from now, or you can be less optimistic, saying 2030.
Yeah.
And
that was actually very optimistic as well.
And that is the classical, have we even defined AGI yet? That is just a sidetrack here.
But I'm just thinking sort of in the light of that, Stargate announcement. Exactly. And, I was thinking that sum of money, and it's kind of, that particular sum of money, binds to this previously, heard idea of, one, it's like a huge cluster, right?
But did you?
$1 trillion cluster.
Exactly. It's a big risk. The AGI, when it comes, will be in the hands of the few or the single person potentially.
But I need to. This is rumor and this is viral stuff on the internet. I think Sam Altman said something just the other week, where he sort of alluded to basically, we moved on to look at super intelligence in the problems we are solving. So then everyone, have they already solved AGI? Or and there was did you? I don't know if you saw that.
It was also a Twitter rumor. That said, rumor. That they had internally said that they already achieved AGI, and then he had to refute that and say no, we have not achieved AGI internally, and we're far.
And this was something that went viral in the rumor in the trenches.
But what he's also saying is it won't be a single point. Now it's AGI, and before it was not. It will be this kind of gradual boiling the frog kind of thing, where AI becomes increasingly intelligent, and then suddenly it's potentially.
And we have been moving the goalposts on this definition quite a bit.
Yeah, with these saturated benchmarks and so on. Yeah, and we probably will be continuing doing that. Right.
And now we have the definitions, the scales. There's a couple. OpenAI has one scale, Google has another scale, and they're kind of the same.
If we
go back to the question,
do you have your predictions of the time frame?
It depends on the definition.
The definition is the.
But I like to divide it a bit, into either cognitive AGI versus more. You can think more agentic kind of AGI, and then physical AGI. But then potentially another which is more societal AGI. And let me just elaborate what I mean. Cognitive is you only have to understand, you don't have to act to change anything, you just have to be able to answer questions basically on a level that is better better than most people. And that can be achieved rather quickly, I would say. Then if you want to be able to do stuff as well, let's say do stuff in a digital space, meaning you don't have to have a robot to do stuff, but it has to be able to navigate the web and operate the computer and click on stuff and whatever. It has to be able to do stuff. That's probably a bit further ahead. If you have to move physically and have a robot that actually interact with the physical world, that at least add like 5 years more, I would say. If you then take the point of saying, we have a place where AGI is used throughout society and companies have adapted to it, that adds 10 more years, I would say. So society is very slow, but if you, that's why I think it's hard to have a single definition. But the first one, saying just cognitive, you don't have to require it to do anything. You just answer questions and understand stuff, then that can happen rather quickly.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's say that we go for a more advanced AGI, not just cognitive, but a place where AGI can actually do stuff, both in the digital world and the physical world. And that's probably not very close. I mean, I would say it's at least 10 years.
So the conversation, the hypothetical scenarios, I would say societal AGI then. When we build up this hypothesis.
Okay, then it's probably even more than 10 years, I would say. But yeah, at some point in the future, we may. I guess you think that it will come at some point. It's just a question of time, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think? Then
I do think so.
Yes.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah.
If you're in this field, it's a question of when.
Yeah.
I agree.
So then we can think about the two extremes, and we have a spectrum between them. And this is basically the question to you: where will we end up? Either we will go to the dystopian kind of nightmare where we'll have the Terminators and robots killing us all, or we can think the more utopian one, where we have an awesome future where AGI will have saved cancer and awesome healthcare. It fixed the climate crisis. We've have free energy. We have free, basically goods and services that we can use without having to pay for it, more or less. And then everything in between. Where do you think we will end up whenever it happens?
It's interesting because
Sorry.
Okay, it's interesting because this question has two sort of actors. Let's say, like if we reduce it to very much, so it has society, and then it has the super intelligence, and I'm thinking, hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Good answer.
But thinking of how so far societies have society has leveraged progress. So we have a few frameworks of how to interpret that. There are some historical frameworks. There are some economical frameworks. So, economical research, points that, stable societies can, sustain and, flourish. So, I don't know, hoping for those stable societies to survive until, the super intelligence is there. That's, I think, a very critical point. So, putting all effort into, democracy model to persevere, that's maybe a big focus there.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Gintare? No. What Gintare? Sorry.
It's getting better and better with every iteration, like turning in the water.
Anyway, it's been a true pleasure to have you here. We have so many more questions that we'd love to be able to cover. Perhaps we can do that after work when we turn off the camera and continue some discussion. But thank you so much for coming here. It's been a true pleasure.
Thanks. That was a great first podcast for me and very great awesome. Experience. Thanks for inviting.
Thank you so much.